Hey guys, Isabel here. Welcome back to Reeled In. So the newest Marvel movie has been released last weekend in theaters, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now I have to say this was a pretty good ending to a trilogy. The Spider-Man trilogy was great for the MCU in my personal opinion, and also for the MCU. I think this one and Captain America all had great trilogies, but this one honestly for me takes the cake. That being said, this is a review for the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie, so there will be spoilers. I waited a weekend for you guys to watch. Hopefully you've seen it, but if not, go watch it and you can come back and watch me. Now I'm gonna honestly say this movie was actually quite intense. I know it's rated only PG-13, but if you have a child who's maybe 10 or younger, I would not necessarily take them to this movie. I would wait a little bit until it's out on digital or streaming, unless you think your child can handle that. You know, that's up to you to decide. Because it starts off right away. The opening sequence is rockets pass, and there isn't anything too graphic, or it doesn't really depict it head on. So that was good, because I don't know how I would have handled it if it did. Because the movie literally depicts animal abuse. And I'm an animal lover. And so I was struggling a little bit throughout the movie. But the opening credits does not start off with the usual fanfare. And instead of all the MCU characters, we actually just get the Guardians characters, which made me really nervous because they usually do that when someone has already passed away, or sometimes they do that if someone's going to. So I was really nervous that we were going to lose either one or more of the Guardians during this movie. But my heart was pounding. I was already sobbing. Bring tissues. Also bring tissues. But this movie reiterates the statement that the Guardians has always been about Rocket and his story. And in the opening, we have the song I Don't Belong Here being played over Rocket, specifically as he kind of walks through nowhere. So obviously that song is about him, whether that be him not belonging where he is right now or where he was in the past, or just any sort of iteration of that. I'm not too sure, but definitely an interesting song choice, because we do know for Marvel, the songs that they picked correlate very well with what their characters are going through or the storyline of the movie. What I also liked about this movie is that there was almost a complete balance of all the characters. I feel like for 1 and 2, we focus a little bit more on Peter Quill for the Guardians, but I feel like this time all the characters were super well written. They were all dynamic. They all had a major part of the movie and in solving all the issues that were going on. So it's not like one was just there strictly for comic relief. They all had a purpose. And they're very balanced characters. But speaking of characters, I thought it was really kind of interesting for Peter Quill's character. He basically started off as a drunk. I get it, he misses Gamora, but I'm assuming it's been a good number of years since the whole Endgame situation happened, for the timeline of, Volume 3. And I wasn't too happy with his character, to be totally honest. I got the ick. Peter Quill gave me the ick for maybe 3/4 of the movie. And honestly, I feel like his whole character arc for this movie was learning to not be a toxic man. That's just my own personal opinion. But what I did like about his character that I think they did differently, and I will tip my hat to Chris Pratt because I think he portrayed this really well, is we finally got to see some vulnerability with Star-Lord, with Peter Quill. In the past Guardians movie, we do see emotion from him, but it's usually quickly covered up with humor, or he'll make a dumb joke. So when he sacrificed himself for Gamora and then instantly ruined the moment with being a boob, basically. And then even in Volume 2, where he finds out his own father put a brain tumor into his mother, we got emotion, but it was more anger. And so it was just nice to see him actually having softer moments in this movie. He was actually he had teary-eyed crying moments, and to really show that he cares for his family members of the other Guardians, especially Rocket. Their whole relationship plays a big part in this movie, and so it was nice to see them. Of course they're bickering, that's their dynamic is that they bicker with each other out of love. but it was really nice to see the actual care he had for Rocket as well as the other members. So that I did like about his character, but the whole thing with Gamora felt very icky to me. On Peter Quill's side, to be totally honest. And also, like I said, balanced characters. Even though Kraglin was only in the movie for a little bit, he still had a major part of the story, and he had his own little character arc with the arrow that he got from Yondu. Now, it wouldn't be a Guardians movie if there was not immediate action within the first 10 minutes of the movie. I had to remind myself of that actually while I was watching it, because Adam Warlock, he arrives quite quickly. He arrives literally as the movie opens. But again, going back to the first Morag arc of Volume 1 and then the whole battery situation in Volume 2, it always opens with action, with the gang sort of fighting together to show how they work as a team, or to highlight who is kind of the leader at that point in the movie. Because as stated in this movie, Peter Quill has not really ever been the leader of the Guardians. It's been Rocket. But now, sort of going back to being hesitant to take your young children to this movie, I will be honest, this deals with a lot of animal abuse, and the main villain, I think, is probably the best villain in MCU history so far, just because he has zero compassion for any other living being or creature besides himself. And the High Evolutionary is textbook characteristic of an abusive person in general. It's kind of like you never know what you say or do will set him off, and he will snap because he's probably lost his mind somewhere throughout the way. But going into this movie, I maybe thought I would have to deal with like 2 or 3 scenes of Rocket's past, which I already knew were going to be heartbreaking and probably disturbing. Actually, all of his backstory and all the surrounding characters revolving his backstory is disturbing. I'm not gonna lie about it, but it was almost the whole movie, which I was like, thankfully I'd mentally prepared myself to watch this. I think if I had not done that, I would have been deeply disturbed. In fact, I was able to desensitize myself before going in. But if you cannot do that, then again, I would just mentally fortify yourself as best you can if you're gonna go see the movie. But if you can't, then I would definitely wait until it comes out a little bit later. I know spoilers and everything, but yeah, take care of yourself. But I will say there are parts with the whole animal abuse where it's kind of like humans and animals. It's like a hybrid, but they look really fake, which I think is part of the reason why I was like, okay for the movie. You can tell it's just an actor in like a bunny suit. So that part I think was also why it was doable. But just like how we go into Rocket's past in the movie, we also deal a little bit with Peter's past, and more importantly, his unresolved fear of going back to Earth. And he actually said a line that I really appreciate, where he's kind of angry at his grandfather for pushing him out of the room when his mother died. I have always believed that pushing Peter away as his mother was dying was not a good move, actually, for any child who unfortunately has to deal with the passing of a parent or guardian. Should not be pushed away, because that kind of gives them the idea that death is a bad thing. Of course, it's very upsetting, but it's not necessarily something that someone has to be afraid of. I know if death is a fear of other people, and that's totally okay. But by pushing Peter away, he kind of learned that death is wrong. It's something that should not be talked about. So the fact that this movie actually finally acknowledged that, and that Peter also kind of learned that that was not the right thing to do, I personally really loved, and I do appreciate that we are talking about it. And also why Peter's fear of going back to Earth and sort of facing his fears head on leads to a lot of his character, again, through Volume 1 through 3. But then we get Gamora, and I honestly was not sure how she was going to show up. I know she was in almost like every scene of the trailer, but since they're separate, I wasn't sure how that was going to come into play. But she's part of the Ravengers now. And I feel like a lot of people are not going to like Gamora's character. I was honestly super fine with it. I understood pretty much immediately that this Gamora was not the Gamora that we've gotten through Volumes 1 and 2 and the one that Thanos sacrificed in Endgame. She's a completely different character, and because she has not lived through all those things yet, her characterization is going to be different. She is going to be more harsh and mean and more tough, because that's how she learned to survive with Thanos all those years ago, and she hasn't exactly been softened or found a safe space up until now, up until she's with the Ravengers. But we do get a little Easter egg of some Doctor Strange magic. I know it's not his magic, but we get magic. So it means that I think one of those alien creatures had a sling ring on him. I was really trying to see, but it kept going really fast and there was a lot of things happening in the movie, so I couldn't quite see that ring on him. But again, how else would he be able to magic his portal. And I think another part of Peter Quill's character that gave me the ick is how he acted with Gamora. Like I said in the beginning, he was a little bit toxic. Like, he was definitely depicting toxic masculinity with the whole I need you to be this way for my own sake. Not a good characterization part, honestly. But I do feel like that was kind of done on purpose in terms of writing. And again, his character arc, he finally was like, you know what, Gamora, I don't need you to be what I want you to be. It's like, yeah, she knows that. And look, I get it. You loved her, and then you lost her, and now you have her again, but it's not exactly her. But no means no. But I also like that whole character separation because it keeps the consequences of Endgame. That's something I think Phase 4 did really well. All of their stories were actually the consequences of Endgame, whether it be political, economical, or personal. So this is a personal consequence of what happened in Endgame, where Gamora is no longer a part of the Guardians. Like, yes, she is there, but she is not within the group. She has found her own path. And honestly, I'm happy for her. I just think it's so funny that in Volume 3, Nebula is the most sane character. Like, she just makes the most sense. But a major plot point for this movie is that Rocket, quite early on, gets injured and they can't operate on him because of the high evolutionary. He put a kill switch in Rocket, essentially, so if anyone tried to open Rocket up, Rocket would immediately pass away. And so they're trying to find code to break the kill switch to save Rocket's life, and it's beautifully painful. This whole movie is beautifully painful. But so they have to go to a planet made out of like organs. So again, if animal abuse doesn't bother you, organs might. There is just a lot of organic tissue going around. And now I'm a squeamish person. Thankfully, it was campy enough where it didn't affect me too much, but there were certain parts where I was kind of like, okay, can we please move on? And I was just so thankful that this movie, at least to me, to my own sense of humor, I found actually very funny, and none of the jokes felt forced. Like, Guardians 1 was kind of funny, but then Guardians 2, most of those earlier jokes felt very forced. But this one, I think, was a very good balance between the horrificness going on and then the light joking side, which we kind of needed, to be honest. Which is like, I think that's why I liked it so much, because we had that horribleness going on in the background. Actually, it wasn't even in the background, it's right in front of your face. So it was definitely needed to have some of that humor. But like I said earlier with the balanced characters, I think we got a little bit more of Mantis's powers, at least how they kind of evolved to make her become more powerful. So that's always fun to see. And now the trailer depicted that Adam Warlock would be an antagonist to the Guardians, and he was, as was his mummy. But I think they made an interesting point with Adam's character because he is a baby. Essentially, they took him out of his cocoon way too early. He's dumb. He's really dumb. But I think that was kind of necessary because, as I said, the high evolutionary is quite the villain. So if you have the high evolutionary, plus if you make Adam Warlock actually competent, I think it would be a little bit too much. And I don't know if the Guardians would be able to survive, honestly, because Adam Warlock is powerful. He's one of those like naturally powerful people. He doesn't know his own strength. He just doesn't know how to like use his brain in connection with his power. Which honestly, I'm okay with Adam Warlock being that characterization. He was part of the humor of the movie. I know some people are like not at all happy about that, but hopefully we'll see Adam Warlock again and we can kind of see him grow out of that. Now again, going back to Gamora, she had a lot of back and forth in this movie. She made me angry sometimes. She did. Like, she was a lot more selfish than I think the original Gamora. But I also understand both points that she was kind of making. Like, I understand why she was like that, because she doesn't know these Guardians. She's not chill with them like that. And, again, at the end of the day, she does help save Rocket. So, we kind of always knew she would do that. But a lot of the issues that the Guardians got into was because of Gamora and her selfishness. And honestly, Peter Quill was kind of freaking her out. And I totally get it, because he was kind of attacking her, being like, hey, why aren't you this person? And why aren't you with me? Which is, again, icky. And so I totally get why she like did not want to be around him. I got it. And she even dropped a really great line of like, why do you need me to be something so you can escape your past? And I was like, yes, like that was actually the one point where I was like, you know what, Gamora, I got you. Yes, like I totally understand. Peter needs to deep dive into himself, which he did, and like figure his own self out. I got it. And Guardians Volume 3 was a first for the F-bomb. We got the F-bomb dropped in this movie, and it was again during a more humorous moment. And again, like if you have a young child and that makes you upset, do not take them until, like, don't take them to the movie. Like this one along with Multiverse of Madness are the two movies I would maybe be hesitant to bring a small child to, just because they're so intense. But eventually their journey takes the Guardians to the planet, I think it's Counter Earth, that the High Evolutionary has created in an effort to save Rocket. Now the whole goal of the High Evolutionary is to create the perfect society, the perfect world. And for some reason that involved turning animals into humans, but they still have their more animal characteristics. So it's basically like a humanoid bunny, a humanoid fox, but they're not apparently violent. I don't know why that's the most perfect world you could think of, but that's what it is for him. But they have some really important scenes on this Earth that it actually is a replica of how we on Earth live today. You know, they land in a suburb, and as they're passing to get to the High Evolutionary's tower, they spot fights, drugs, violence, they see homelessness. So again, it happens in our world now. So I don't actually believe the High Evolutionary is ever going to be able to make the perfect society, because the perfect society does not exist, which I think this movie also is trying to depict, because something is always going to replicate something else. So Counter Earth, while not exactly looking like our Earth, replicates our society, the good and the bad. And once the High Evolutionary is told that this is happening in his society, his immediate plan is to create something new, or plan to create something new to make a more perfect society. But again, it is never going to work, because all of his creations only have root memory, which is part of the reason why he's also searching for Rocket, because he wants to take Rocket's brain, because out of all the things that has ever been created by him, Rocket is the only one who has been able to have original thought, which is kind of messed up, again, abusive, and the whole like slavery, property, like child labor sort of thing also ties into this movie. Like, it's an intense movie, and it does a great job at being intense. But it's quickly discovered that his tower is in fact, I think, part of his ship that he must have landed a long time ago. And so he's gonna blow up the whole world, because none of those creatures he created is worth anything to him anymore, upon finding out that it's just basically a replica of Earth's own society. So he blows up the planet, and while he's blowing up the planet, he's trying to escape. But we got some cool character development with Groot, because he can fly. I did not know he would be able to do that. So it's like he can do a lot more physical changes with physical fighting now than he used to, which again is cool to see. Now I know that I said that this is spoilers, but I don't want to give one thing away in case you guys are watching this first and just have not seen the movie yet. But there was a point where I was crying so hard that I actually wanted to vomit, because I was trying not to sob out loud in the theater. And so everything was just clenched, which just hurt. And it just felt like I wanted to be sick. So I won't say what part that was. If you've seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so bring the tissues, because my gosh. I have to say, in terms of final battles, I was actually quite impressed with this sequence, because usually they kind of last maybe like 10, 15 minutes. But this whole sequence lasted the entire 30 minutes, the last 30 minutes of the movie. And they bring in the rest of the Nowhere population, because they added thrusters to the Nowhere head, which was just kind of mind-blowing to me. I thought that was really cool. And they're saving, again, the children that the High Evolutionary has made after he made these animal humanoids. And so they're trying to save everyone, and they save all of the animals too, which was so heartwarming for me, because at first nobody thinks to save them except for Rocket, which really got me. And I do also recommend watching volumes 1 and 2 before you see volume 3, because that whole sort of ongoing joke where Rocket does not believe he's a raccoon, he's kind of clarified at the end where he opens up a cage of these really tiny raccoons and he sees the common name of the animal as a raccoon. Oof, I still just get like emotional thinking about it. So we got a lot of growth for Rocket as well as his backstory. And again with Mantis and Drax, they each had their own moment. Drax was to help with the children because of his own experience with being a father. And then Mantis, with her powers, coming to save the day with, I forgot the name of them, but like the tentacle creatures that are kind of creepy. She can control them. She's friends with them, which is kind of cool. But eventually they save the day. And in a very bittersweet moment, they kind of agree to go off on their separate ways. Again, Peter, his character arc, he came to terms with the fact that him and Gamora, at least for now, are not gonna be together, and that is okay. Sometimes life does not have a happy ending in that way, which is again totally fine. He stopped being a toxic man, totally fine. And in the end, Drax was going to stay behind to help with all the now refugees in Nowhere, especially all the younger children that they saved from the High Evolutionary. So he gets to be a dad again, a role that was taken from him originally by Ronan the Accuser. And Nebula ends up also staying behind, but now she has a family and is kind of the leader of their own society. And Rocket is the leader of the Guardians because his story was always about him, and he finally is a raccoon. Rocket becomes a raccoon, the leader of the Guardians. And there's a scene at the end where Gamora goes back to her Ravager family, and you can honestly just see how happy she is. So she becomes a Ravager. So she did find a family, not with the Guardians, as I think we all kind of hoped for, but she became a Ravager. And I think it's important that she did not become, again, part of the group of the Guardians, because, again, I think that's undoing everything that happened in Endgame with her character specifically. So I am personally glad for the change. And Groot spoke. He said, "I love you guys," which, according to James Gunn, is us, the audience, becoming a part of the Guardian family and finally being able to understand him, which just warms my heart, honestly. But we have 2 end credit scenes for this movie. The first is the mid-credit with Groot and Rocket. They're off somewhere else in the galaxy saving the day. Groot is a big daddy. That's what he's massive. Adam Warlock is there, and one of the girls from the High Evolutionary, her eyes shine purple and she has these interesting powers. I think in the comics she is a different Guardians character. The comics have a plethora of Guardians characters. In fact, the ones we all know and love from the MCU were not even the first Guardians of the Galaxy in the comics. So if we do get more Guardians in the future, it'll be interesting to see what new characters they may or may not add in. And the end credit is just Peter hanging out with his grandfather, who was still alive. And then we get a message at the end saying Star-Lord will return. Was not really expecting it. I kind of hoped not, because he's been in here for a couple of years. Personally, I'm ready to move on. Like I said, this was a really great ending, I feel like, for the Guardians. But they did say Star-Lord and not Peter Quill, so if someone else takes up the Star-Lord mantle, I can kind of see that happening. Also, I just realized I didn't even say the ending for Mantis. I love that she's going to go off and just discover herself, like she says in the movie she did what Ego wanted her to do, and then she did what the Guardians wanted her to do. So, I am for Mantis going out and finding what she wants to do for herself. I'm here for it. Again, sobbing literally the whole movie. I have not, it's been a very long time since I have walked out of the theater feeling just a plethora of emotions, like happy, sad, bittersweet, just like content. Like every single emotion I felt after walking out of that theater. I actually had to take some time for myself when I got home, eat some soup, like whatever your comfort food is. And I know sometimes in movies, making your characters have equal importance in your story and having them be balanced and having all of them be significant can be very difficult. So the fact that this movie, I think, does that so well, it's honestly a testament to, I think, the writing, and just you can tell how much, James Gunn and the rest of the actors feel and love their characters. And again, in terms of emotion, not only do we see Peter Quill show it more readily, but we also see Drax show it at the end when he's saying goodbye to Mantis, which honestly made me love Drax even more. So guys, that was my review for Volume 3. I know I didn't really talk about what was going on in Rocket's backstory, but that's because I personally found it very disturbing. And if I continue to talk about what those animals went through, I will personally get very upset, so I'm just not going to do it. But again, it is intense. Prepare yourself. But it is, a very bittersweet movie with amazing character growth, but I really recommend seeing it. Usually for MCU movies, I do have something kind of like more critical to say about it, but again, because I was really sobbing the whole time, there are sections where I just could not write anything at all in my little notebook during the movie. But I will be seeing it again a second time. Hopefully I make it out okay. But yeah, thank you for watching. So leave a like on the video. Comment, what did you think about this movie if you've seen it? And did you sob like literally 10 times like I did? And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future Marvel movie reviews, as well as Marvel reaction videos. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.